What's good, Brookago? This is Kahlief here. What up, what up, what up? I hope you're all doing really well. We have our Xbox review right now. I'm going to go into a little bit of what it's been like to have the system for a little bit underneath a month. Shout out again to the wonderful folks over at Xbox for, shooting over the Xbox Series X early. We have had ample time to play around with the system, to get a chance to see what it feels like, to get a chance to see what all the bells and whistles have kind of been with the system. And I think a lot of reviews that you've seen kind of already go out have really been doing deep dives into the tech. I think that part has been well versed, and everyone has kind of done all their analysis on the teraflops and how fast everything is running, and if are things hitting 60 frames per second, or things pushing out at 4K. For me, that part isn't really that important. I think for me, what I want to convey in this particular review, which is not going to be super, super long, because I think that all of that information has kind of been well tread through. I think a lot of folks have already kind of done that work and have had those conversations already. And I don't feel like our work will add anything else to that conversation that you can't already find from a Polygon or a IGN or a Digital Foundry. So I kind of want to spend my time with, ideas around, you know, games that I've really been digging into, and how those games feel on the system. What the system kind of gives you when you first get it, and not kind of a total walkthrough of all of that stuff. But this is really going to be about how I've been feeling while playing the Xbox Series X. I think that those things to me are the things that actually kind of matter in the bigger scope of what these conversations have been so far. I think for me, it's been a lot of conversations about not only, is this stuff next gen in the way that we think it is? Do we feel like it's really been a part of that conversation in a real way? And does it feel really good to play as a system? Does it feel like we're seeing any innovation happen in ways that we thought that we would? And for me, the answer has been absolutely yes. I think that the conversation that we've seen happen around what are the things that you should care about, and what are the things you should pay attention to, are pretty easy to understand once you've had time in with it. Once you've kind of plugged it in, you've kind of seen the fidelity there, you kind of seen how fast things work. Of course, the biggest conversation for me as a thing that you'll go home and really see, feel, and understand is speed. I think that is the thing that pulls the Xbox Series X away from the last gen versions of the console in an actual conceivable, tangible way. I think that everything in that ecosystem is just faster. And I think that all those things make a huge difference to you as a user and as a person who's going to be consuming content on this machine, especially if it's your primary machine. I think if you're coming from an Xbox One X, you're going to see instant changes in the way that you think about how you kind of interact with the content, interact with the games that you play, and the way that you kind of play around in the system itself. I know we already did our video that showed you kind of breakdowns of some of the games and how fast some of those things download and move. And I think some of those things are still super important, because again, Xbox quick resume is one of the things that is the most important parts of the Xbox Series X ecosystem, the velocity architecture that they talked about. It is the thing that will bring you back to the system in a way that lets you understand that you are not just using old tech, that you're not using stuff that you were previously touching before, that you're not just in that same Microsoft ecosystem, and that the hype doesn't actually match the things that they talked about as being factual. These are things that actually, from a hardware perspective, make a big difference. I think that those things actually come through in a really spectacular way on the Xbox Series X. I think that those parts of what it's trying to do really do pull together the idea of them caring about your time, and how the SSD that's in the system, and the architecture, and the SoC, the silicon on chip, all those things matter in a way that actually makes your gameplay different. I totally have changed the way that I kind of think about what I do when I'm playing on my system, on my Xbox Series X, because I never feel tied down now. I don't really feel like I'm like, oh, okay, I don't want to jump into this one particular game because I have to worry about how long it's going to load. Like, that's not a thing that I think about in a real way, in that same way that I used to think about. I don't do that anymore. I just automatically just switch between things on the fly, and it doesn't become a thing that I think about. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to jump into Watch Dogs. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of done with this mission, or I'm stuck in a place and, I kind of don't care anymore. Or, I'm feeling, or I got to go run and go do something else. Like, let me get a quick game of something else in that just magically just like pops itself in within seconds. And it doesn't feel like anything that I've experienced before. Like, this is a thing that I know a lot of people have talked about, well, why don't you just spend $500 on a PC instead? And I get that. That makes a lot of sense from a lot of different angles and from a lot of different ways that you would talk about it. But from a nuts and bolts perspective, from a console perspective, from a sitting on the couch perspective, the Xbox Series X feels faster. It is faster. Quick resume is a monumental, fundamental changing of the way that I now consume the games that I play and how I interact with, the hardware in a different way. I don't ever have to think about how fast the thing is going to load anymore. I saw someone put out something the other day that was really actually profound, and I thought it was actually pretty brilliant in the way that they talked about it. They talked about all that time that you would usually spend kind of fumbling on your phone in between loads for stuff. The system is so fast, you don't do that anymore. And it absolutely is true, because I remember, playing Rage the other day. I'm sorry, not playing Rage, playing Doom the other day. And just like, by the time that I even thought about picking up my phone, I was already loaded into game. That stuff is super, super important. I think those things are fundamental changes in big ways. I think the other thing that we see, that's a big part of, or the way that all that stuff works is, small things like the controller. The controller now just feels nicer. On the back of the controller, there's some fantastic, pieces of, I don't know if you would call it like grip tape, because it's not like grip tape. It's just like a way to, get close. Like, I don't know, the material that they're using on the back of that controller just feels nice. It feels good. It feels like it also has like a little bunch of extra grip in there too, that feels really smart and usable in a way that is also, like, you don't think about those things in a real tangible way. Usually you don't think about that stuff, but it is something where you're just like, when you put it in your hand, you're just like, oh, like this grip feels more substantial. It makes the back of the controller just feel nicer. It makes, the weight and everything else just feel good. Like, it's a small thing from a design perspective, but it is a thing that actually makes a lot of sense. And it is something that actually makes you feel, or makes the controller feel, better and better manufactured. And it feels like there's more care taken with it. It doesn't feel cheap in the way that sometimes a controller can feel. And it was just really smart in the way they do it. The way they moved the controller, moving the buttons over to the other side, of the share button now is like in the middle of the pad. That's a small thing that they changed. That was actually pretty brilliant and smart. It just moves everything into a space that feels better. But it is one of those things that, it's not doing anything fundamentally different. I do wish that they had maybe gone in another direction. Not something that was kind of super out of the norm for what they were doing from a form factor, but it would have been nice to see a small refresh that was more than just the grips on the back of the controller and on the triggers, and then the moving of the share button, or their share button. It's a pretty standard design at this point. It is one of those, if it's not messed up, don't mess with it kind of deals. But I wish that they would have gone in another direction with that in a bigger way. I do think that from a design perspective, the Xbox Series X is still like a pretty beautiful machine. I think it looks really stylish and it looks really slick within your console spaces. It doesn't feel like it's something that, again, feels like they didn't have a lot of forethought into it. You can tell that they took care with the way that they designed it, with the way that they wanted to make everything kind of look and feel sleek and also kind of fit into different spaces that you're going to want it to kind of lay in. Mine is on it's horizontal. I know a lot of people say that's terrible, and I don't care what you say. It's the only place it's going to fit in my console, because if I stood it up vertically, it's just too big. There is no real space for me to put that thing in where my TV is and the rest of my stands and all that kind of stuff. But I am a horizontal stand. I will leave it horizontal for as long as I need it to. And it looks good, and it still plays exactly the way it needs to and all those things. I think that part is just totally fine, and no one has to worry about that. I do think that, from another perspective, there are a couple of things that I think all of you at home absolutely need to be paying attention to. I think the biggest thing that we've talked about is next gen games being as big as they possibly can be. A lot of that is going to eat up a lot of your space on your hard drive. I know I have already gone through the amount of space on the internal SSD already and have already filled that up with probably around 12 to 15 games already, both a mix of next gen and previous gen and 360 games. I do think that the purchase of the external card that they have is necessary. I don't think that it's a thing where you take that lightly and say that, storage is not going to be a problem in next gen. Storage is absolutely going to be a thing in next gen that you have to pay attention to. So it is going to be an exorbitant cost if you buy that 1 terabyte drive. Microsoft provided one for me, so I didn't have to incur that cost, and it would have been a thing that I would have had a double take to say, like, do I need this? Do I want to spend this money on this thing? I do think it's a necessary thing, though. I think it is something that you should definitely wind up copying. Saving up money for that expansion card is probably really a smart thing to do. But I think, in the bigger scheme and the bigger idea of what that means for you at home is that, you may have stuff that you just shovel off to a second drive. That's going to be your storage drive. You want to move things back and forth between those two. That's the easy way to do it, to keep sure that you have enough stuff and enough space on your internal drive. But I do think it's a thing that to think about and to worry about in the forefront. Besides all that, there are only really like one major gripe that I have, and that gripe is really that they didn't do anything really with the UI at all. The UI is pretty standard still. It's the same one that we've seen from the previous gen. It's not really exciting. I wish that they had done something different with it. It would have really been nice to have kind of seen, a change in the way that the design would look, so that when you pop it on for the first time, even if you don't get all the newness, you get some feeling of new in that space. I think that that's an important thing. I think when you have those parts of the system in there in that way, it just is a nice touch to be able to feel like I have purchased a new thing and it feels brand new in all the aspects that it can. You don't really get a new controller feel except for grips and, again, the way the button's placed. You don't really get anything different in the UI and the way that works. So everything that happens is kind of from an experience standpoint. And to a certain extent, that's a little bit disappointing. I'll be honest. Like, I really wish that they had kind of doubled down. And they said earlier on in 2020 that they weren't really going to mess around with the UI that much. And I'm still disappointed in that. I'm hoping that in future iterations of the software that they hopefully change some things around and move some stuff around, because it would be nice to be able to just see that difference be there in that space. Besides that, everything else is brilliant. It feels good. It feels snappy. Everything feels as fast as it possibly can. Again, Game Pass is going to be a huge thing for them this year and going forward. xCloud is going to be a huge thing for them going forward. The games that I've been playing have just felt really good and snappy. Like, everything has felt extremely good and has made me feel like even the small upgrades to games that were a little bit older, like I've been playing Gears 5. Gears 5 looks and feels brilliant. It still looks as gorgeous as it did before, but it even has a little bit more flair and a little bit more fidelity because it's on the newer system. It feels good. It still plays as well as it always has. And now it just has that other layer of polish and speed when you're loading it up that, again, it just makes the experience a little bit better. So I've been playing a bunch of that. I've been playing a whole bunch of Watch Dogs Legion. You can finally see the ray tracing that's in that game on a console, which has been a thing that I didn't think was going to be something that was really going to be a thing I cared about that much, but it absolutely does make a difference. And to have buttery smooth frame rates, with these big open worlds is also a thing that matters a bunch. It's not a thing that is inconsequential. It does make you think about like, oh, am I going to get this game on next gen, or am I going to get this on my PC? For ease of, for comfortability, just sitting on the couch as opposed to trying to play this thing in another room. One of the biggest ones that I thought was something I didn't expect was just how much faster Destiny loads. I'm a big Destiny 2 player. I played that a bunch. It was a pain in the ass in previous gen to load up anything on that system. I mean, in that game, it was just took forever to do anything. And it's just like, oh, I got to pop open a menu. Oh my God, I got to wait here for 15 minutes to wait for that thing to actually pop up. That's an exaggeration, but it does feel snappier. Like just getting and loading into, the tower, is faster. All those things are going to be the stuff that matters to you when you're playing this system and you're thinking about, was it worth me spending the money that I spent to get this thing? So to wrap up, again, everything is faster. Everything feels smoother. You're going to get a lot of visual upgrades. You're going to get a lot of small upgrades. Playing 360 games on there felt a lot better. They had some HDR in there. I've been playing a whole bunch of Rockstar table tennis. That's one of my favorite games of many generations past. And it feels snappy. It feels good. Like, again, those are going to be the words that you're going to hear a lot from conversations around the Xbox Series X. Is about speed, is about function. It's about kind of nuts and bolts stuff, alongside all the facts that, games are going to be really pretty on that system. So yeah, I'm still, all these kinds of things are kind of reviews in process. We're still waiting to see, which other next gen games are gonna kind of come to the system and feel good. We're waiting on Demon Souls as a thing to be something, for the PlayStation 5 soon. I'm sure that game is going to be coming over to the Xbox side of the fence. I'm going to be checking out NBA 2K 2021. I think that's it at this point, and checking that out on next gen on Xbox Series X to see what that feels like and looks like. And then again, there's going to be stuff that's just going to be coming out and pulling itself in, and it's just going to be able to kind of see what check boxes it ticks off when we get a chance to play with it. So I hope this was super useful. Again, we're going to be seeing this stuff in 2 or 3 days at this point. You'll be able to have it if you don't already have it now. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about, what your experiences are, how you're feeling about it, what things you have expectations for, and what things you're kind of hoping to see from not only a software perspective, from a hardware perspective that they're going to do a little bit later down the line. So again, thank you everybody for coming through, checking out our Xbox Series X review. Massive love to you all. Thank you so much for giving us so much love on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. It's been great to see so many folks come through and give us love. And we'll see you soon with another review of another system coming up fairly soon. So again, everybody in Brookago, much love to you all. Peace.